Hi, I'm Juliet Hall. I'm an advisor, a leadership consultant. I speak on national stages on the topics of self maximization and servant leadership. I'm also a new author. I've written this book entitled Own Your Opportunities, a story of self-discovery and self-determination. And today I would like to share some content from the book. Specifically, I want to talk about working for a company that also works for you. And if that title appeals to you, then you need to listen to this video because I'm going to share 3 P's to work for a company that also works for you. So who is this message for? Again, if you are an individual who is considering a career pivot, if you are on a job search, if you are at a crossroads and seeking new employment, this message is for you. Also, if you just want to be intentional about where you work, intentional about your workspace or environment, where you spend your time professionally, and if you want to land in a space and be intentional about that, land in a space where you can grow, develop, and thrive, then this message is for you as well. So I want to start by sharing a little story just about my own personal journey. I'm very transparent about it. I share a lot in my book as well. But I was in corporate America for 20 years. And when I graduated from college many, many years ago, I scrambled to find a job. I had way too much fun when I was in college, and I did not plan as well as I should have. I knew that I didn't want to go back home to live with my parents. I also knew that I didn't want to go back to get a secondary degree right away. So my only option was to find a job. It's just that I didn't really set myself up ultimately for success to find a company where I would thrive right away. So I just went with the only company that offered me a job at the time, and it was with a bank. And I can tell you that while I learned a lot working for this particular bank, like I learned how to manage people, I learned how to operate a budget. I learned about hiring and firing even. I mean, there was a lot that I learned. I learned what good leadership looked like, bad leadership, what I didn't want to be as a leader. So there's always something positive that you can glean from experiences that don't feel quite so positive. But ultimately, I knew that I didn't want to get locked into banking. Ultimately, I knew that I needed to find another place of employment that spoke to me. And I knew that the culture of the bank that I worked for at the time was not a culture that would allow me to grow and thrive. I also knew that I didn't necessarily care for some of the people in leadership, not all. There were some great leaders, obviously, but there were also some challenging leaders that I worked with that I just knew that I didn't necessarily feel encouraged. I'm talking about managers who would use a lot of profanity, that would shout, that would point fingers at people. It just wasn't the type of environment where I felt like I could be the best Juliet that I could be. And then also, truth be told, I didn't necessarily like the work that I did. I wasn't really excited about other people's money. And so I didn't feel like I was using all of the gifts that felt natural to me. And so overall, I found myself in a place of dread going to work. I would pull up in the parking lot and my chest would get tight. And it wasn't long after that before my attitude started to sink. And so I just had to develop an exit plan for myself. I was at that crossroads where I was trying to figure out, where can I work? What organization can I work for? What other organization can I work for that's also going to work for me? And I just remember being on break at a restaurant, one of my favorite restaurants, and I was having this conversation with myself. what am I going to do? Because I cannot stay at, at that particular place of employment, that bank. So I knew that I needed to make some decisions. I needed to be intentional. And that's one of the first things I want to share with you is you've got to be intentional about where you want to dedicate a third of your life every day for 5 days a week. And so I had to make a decision that my quality of life means more to me than any amount of money and any kind of title. And I just didn't want to exist on a job. I wanted to live. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to spread my wings. I wanted to discover who Juliet was, who Juliet is at that time. And so I was very intentional at that crossroads when I was contemplating my next move. And I also thought, okay, well, maybe I need to approach this opportunity to find a new place of employment the way I would a relationship. Yeah, when I want to pursue a particular relationship, or if I'm open to being pursued by, whatever that is, whatever the relationship is, whether it's with a romantic partner or even a friendship, if you will, I want it to be very intentional about, I'm intentional about that. I'm intentional about the people that I bring in my life. Likewise, working for an organization or pursuing a particular organization that you want to work for, you want to be just as intentional. You want to have that mindset of intentionality, because a company is also going to be very intentional about selecting you. You also want to be selective and intentional about dedicating your time and your energy and your talents to that organization. So with that said, I want to go ahead and jump into the 3 P's. The first P is principles, or you can say values. Principles or values of an organization are so important. And that's really where you need to start, because your values are the foundation of your belief system, and how you act, the decisions that you make, how you behave really do reflect your values. And I know that where there is alignment in values with, let's just say, even with a relationship, if you're in a relationship with someone and you two value the same things matter to you, and you base your decisions based off of those values, the likelihood of success is greater than if you had a conflict in values. The relationship probably wouldn't last very long. And it's the same mindset when you are researching an organization that you want to work for. You want to be very intentional about understanding what those values are. So you've got to do your research there. So just think about this. First of all, ask yourself, what are your values? Do you know what you value? So, for example, if you know that you value creativity, then look for organizations that have a core value of innovation or an entrepreneurial spirit or something similar to that. Think about that. Or if you value social responsibility, look for an organization that values community or perhaps generosity. And if you value flexibility in your work schedule, or if you value a sense of freedom, then look for an organization where their core values might be autonomy or trust, or somewhere along that vein. So the key is, first, get to know what it is that you truly value. So you have to have a conversation with yourself and ask yourself those questions and think about what matters to you. And then as you're researching organizations, start with their core values and see if there's any alignment there. In my book, Own Your Opportunities, I actually provide some questions that you might consider asking if you are fortunate to have an interview with a company that you think you may be interested in, I'm just going to only give you a couple of questions to think about under the values to see if there's alignment there. So one question you may consider asking if you're in an interview with a hiring manager or with human resources, what do you like the most about working for this company? That's a question you can ask. Another question, how are values recognized in this company? And how do you recognize values on your team? And do those decisions that you make, do decisions connect to a value? Those are some questions to consider asking and see what kind of response that you get. I'm pretty sure that those might even be some questions that might impress the hiring manager or someone in human resources, because it would certainly reflect that you've been very thoughtful about this. But again, this is your moment to make sure that your values align or your principles align with that of the organization that you're considering to work for. So that's the first P, principles. The second P is people. Now, honestly, money is important. Benefits are important. So obviously you want to make sure that as you are researching organizations that, that you understand what the salary ranges are and what benefits are provided, because you have to live and that is important. But there are some other things that must be met, some needs that must be met, in addition to the money and in addition to the benefits. And so, the second P is people. You want to look at how a company values its people. When I worked for the bank, the mission statement was all about protecting the interests of the shareholders. And that is absolutely important. But it's also important for an organization to have a focus on people, the people who actually work there. So when you are considering an organization to work for, take the time to study the people. You might consider going on LinkedIn and reaching out to a couple of individuals who work for an organization that you're interested in, and ask to spend some time with them. Ask if they would be willing to share their work experience, their work life with you. Be intentional about the questions that you ask. Are there opportunities for growth? Does the organization offer tuition reimbursement? Why do you stay at the organization? How long have you been there? And has it been everything that you thought it would be? What are some of your highs and lows? I mean, these are things that you want to think about and ask people who work there, interview them if you can, to get insights into their own personal experiences. Hopefully they will be willing to share. But also in my book, I want to outline some other questions that you might consider if you are able to interview not just people people in the organization, but if you are on an official interview with human resources, you may consider asking some of these questions here, taken from my book. What is the company's retention rate? Why do employees leave? What is it about the company that keeps you engaged? So this is very important. Here's one. How does the company show grace if a goal or deadline isn't met? So these are just some questions from the book on your opportunities that you might consider asking if you are able to get on an interview with an organization that you're considering. But again, that's people is the second P, and you want to be very intentional about going down that path and exploring how a company really treats its people and get the real deal. The third P, so we talked about principles, we talked about people. The third P is product. And I think product is very important because if you are working for an organization and you believe in the products and you are a raving fan of the products and you consume the products yourself, I think the chances of your enjoying going to work will be a lot higher. The chances would be higher. You may be more engaged because you believe in that product. I know when I was going through my mental process of the 3Ps, I was at a restaurant, one of my favorite restaurants, and I took a bite of the food and I was like, oh my gosh, I can get excited about this. So, I mean, people laugh when I tell them that, but it's true. That's when the light bulb really hit for me. I began to study. I actually connected through this organization, through the food, and I began to look deeper into the organization. I looked at how the people, how they enjoyed being at work. I looked at what the company stood for. These were things that I was contemplating when I was at my crossroads. And I went down that path. I was very intentional. I did my research. I knew I already liked the food. I was a frequent customer of this particular restaurant, but I needed to make sure that there was value alignment and that there was also a focus on people. And when I did my research and all my boxes were checked, I went through the interviewing process. It took me a while to get on board this particular organization, but when I did make the transition from the bank to this restaurant company, I was there for 17 years and I had a very fulfilling career. So I know that this process that I'm sharing with you, it certainly worked for me, and I do believe it'll work for you. And oh, by the way, just some questions you may want to ask relative to the products. And again, this is taken from my book. Think about this. What brands are you a fan of? What companies that you're considering have a loyal following of customers or consumers? And what kind of reputation does the company you are considering have? So those are just a few questions that will hopefully guide your thought process. Again, the 3Ps: principles, people, product. Be intentional. And I believe that through your intentionality and again, just being very thoughtful in your process, that will help you on your journey. It'll help you when you're at that crossroads to find and work for a company that will also work for you. All right. I hope this was helpful. If you would like to follow me on social media, I am on Instagram at Juliet.Hall, and that is spelled JULIET.HALL. Obviously, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do plan on sharing more content that has a specific focus on servant leadership and self-maximization. Much of my content will also come from this book as well, Own Your Opportunities, a story of self-discovery and self-determination. This book is published by Post Hill Press, and it is available wherever you buy books. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, etc. It's at independent bookstores as well. And I hope that you will pick up a copy. If you have any questions for me, please leave a comment below. And I am very engaged with my followers, so I will answer your question as quickly as I can. Thank you so much. Have a great day.